Hello. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully this will work. Let's see. Hello. Hello. Thank you very, very much again for joining me on this Sunday, for me, afternoon. I always enjoy these lives with you. I like talking to you about language learning. It's obviously why we're here. And I hope that today, talking about my experience of a month of learning Estonian will be something you will enjoy. I got so many questions about this month from you. So thank you all for contributing to this live in a very active and positive way. I really, really appreciate it. It helps me to read all of these comments and questions, because it means that I can really focus on the things that are of interest to you. And I hope that I deliver on that today when I talk about what it's been like learning Estonian for a month, and using the Speakly app, of course, as well. So the very first question I got was, why Estonian and why Speakly? Well, the Speakly thing, I'd kind of played with Speakly a few months ago, and I wrote something on Twitter saying, I played with a bit of Estonian, maybe in February, March, I can't remember exactly when. And I think a couple of days later, there was a tweet by Lindy on Speak. She sort of mentioned these different language apps and things that she was using, and I didn't see Speakly there, and I sort of just added on, oh, well, what about Speakly? I've been using it a little bit just to play around with it, and didn't see it mentioned, and I thought it was actually quite good. And she said, oh, I've used it too, and actually I'm preparing an entire thing about Speakly. So she then released sort of a guide around Speakly as well. And if you've not seen it, please do go and check it out. Obviously, Lindy's very good, or much better than me at making these videos. And I know that I'm not quite at her level, unfortunately, with making videos. But she does a very good job at doing that. And also, if you've not seen a review of Speakly, there's one also by Big Bong. And the Big Bong review is actually really quite good in terms of showing you what Speakly does and how to use it. I think that's a pretty good review. And then there's the Speakly blog and Speakly podcast itself that you can have a look at. So feel free to go away and look at those. What I wanted to do was a bit different, because I see all of the reviews of sort of what this does, how it works, kind of, but I wanted to actually test it out and see if I could learn a language using the app exclusively. In the beginning, I made a video and I showed the books that I have for Estonian, and I talked a little bit about these books that I have and about sort of that I'd looked at Estonian in the past, but not really learnt it. And that was kind of, I'd gone through those few days of playing with Speakly with Estonian, but I didn't really get very far. I did maybe 100-200 words max over a couple of weeks of playing with it, and just taking it very slowly. But I sort of had a break from that between then and now, and then I was talking to the CEO of Speakly, Oit, and we were talking about it, and we did an interview about this idea of me doing Estonian for a month. And the reason I chose Estonian is because it was the only language that I could honestly say to you, I haven't ever spoken it. I couldn't do that in the same way with Finnish, because I am very aware that I did study Finnish to kind of an A2 level. And so doing a month of Finnish and having already reached an A2 level, even though it was years ago and my Finnish is nowhere near that level now, it didn't feel like an honest start from zero. So that's kind of why I chose Estonian. Also, if any of you have ever seen any interviews where I'm asked which languages I like, I always say that my favorite language is German. I started saying that because that's actually true. But in terms of the sounds of languages, I really love the sound of Icelandic and I really love the sound of Estonian. And I've always said that. And it's just been a truth for a long time. So the idea of learning Estonian, also Oit and Ingel, who are the CEOs of Speakly, being Estonian, the app actually coming from Estonia, it made a lot of sense on a lot of levels to choose Estonian. Obviously, I couldn't really choose any of the Romance languages or German because I already speak them way beyond a 4,000 word level, which is a sort of 4,000 is the number of words that are in the Speakly app for each language. So you learn around 4,000 words, and that's roughly, as Oit would describe it, as kind of a B2 level in the language. That's kind of where you end up at the end of Speakly, this kind of B2-ish level. So what I wanted to do within the month was to take a number of words that wasn't so crazy that I would have no chance of memorizing them. So I'd only ever done this once before, and that was with German. And I did it in a very, very unique set of circumstances. I moved to Germany, I lived with a German family, and I was studying roughly 130 words a day. Now, I know that sounds crazy, and I know it is kind of crazy. My goal with that was to go through the whole of the UK education system of high school, what you're taught at school, and pick up all that vocabulary in German and then move forward using it. But I've not really done that since then. I was doing kind of 7, 8 hours a day of study at that point. And I wanted to see for myself, can I do that kind of thing again? And it seemed like a really good opportunity to test out how I could do it. I was conscious that Estonian isn't German, so learning German as an English speaker, having already studied Swedish and having already knowing French, I was going to be a huge advantage learning German from that background than, say, learning Estonian, because my Finnish was never that great to be a huge help with Estonian. It was going to help me in certain areas. I'd recognize certain ways of phrasing things, maybe, or certain words, but it was never going to be a big boost to my Estonian. What I found was when I went through, and this is kind of how I ended up with 40 words a day, was I went through this Enagu Eesti book. At the very back, there was a word list for the A1, A2 level. And what I noticed very quickly was that there were a number of words I recognized from Indo-European languages, mostly German. And what I noticed with Estonian, as compared to, say, Finnish, many more words are borrowed into Estonian from other European languages, Indo-European languages. So that was a big help to sort of expand my vocabulary. And I realized that having that advantage meant that probably some of the Finnish might help to retain words. And so I could probably comfortably get through 40 words to get to a level where I was at kind of that A1, A2 type level, where I would be like A2 level where I could start talking to people. And that's kind of where I came from for this idea to do it. And also it would show what Speakly does. So with Estonian, and I probably wanted to know how I feel I got on with Estonian, and at the end of 2 months, at the end of 1 month with Estonian, what I can say to you is sort of to give you sort of the ending and then talk through in more detail. I would say that probably I have got to, in terms of my oral comprehension and speaking ability, to somewhere where I'd expect somebody to sit the A2 exam and pass. Where I'm going to make a difference, though, is that the pass rate is around 62%, and I usually aim for high 90s, 100% in these kinds of levels when I say that I have a language at that level. I would say I'm more around the 60, 70% mark than the 90, 100% mark, which is where I was, say, with Turkish at the end of my A1 and A2 exams in Turkish. I scored 96, 97%, I believe, in those exams. Whereas I think if I were to do the same exam in Estonian today, I would probably score maybe around 70-ish%. I don't feel as confident as I did with Turkish at that point, but still, I feel more confident than I do in Gaelic, having done it for a year on a course, on a sort of a class once a week. Understand that from that what you will. That's no reflection on my Gaelic teacher. It's more a reflection on when we talk about how long you studied a language, it's definitely the intensity with which you studied it that carries you through. So for Estonian, I studied around 3 to 4 hours a day of Estonian. which is a lot. When it's a new language and you're focused on it, it's a lot. How that worked for me was it took a lot of sort of my memory skills to really focus on trying to remember certain words that maybe weren't obvious to me in the beginning, and to make the difference between them. So when I first started, I found that very, very easy to do because there were just a few different words, and then the words in Estonian are not so crazy to remember. It does get a little bit more challenging to retain all of them. And the way I would do this would be to go through a word, pull it apart, and say, for example, make a story out of a word. So, for example, I'm just thinking of a word I came across yesterday, which is paranda. And paranda means correct. So paranda means is correct me. Okay. So in Estonian, the way I think of paranda is I think of a veranda in English, and that gives me most of the word. So I want you to correct me, please, on the veranda. So I think of the please with the plosive p, and I make that a very strong image of me going please. Please, sorry about that. I got very, my hands were crazy there, and I knocked the phone down for the aesthetics on Instagram. Oh, dearie me. Okay, so I'm thinking of this very plosive and very memorable plosive P sound, and then getting corrected on the veranda. Please correct me with my Estonian if I make mistakes. So it would be palun paranda. And then I remember the word paranda because of all of that. And that's kind of a lot of what I've done with Estonian the whole way through. I found it a very useful thing to do. It helps when the more languages you know and the more words you know, and the more inventive you get with your sort of thoughts on memory and how to remember words, it really helps. So Ivo, thank you very much, Palu, and congratulations, many congratulations. Thank you. It's great, Aite. It's been a fantastic experience doing that. And at the end of 1,240 words is 40 words a day for 31 days. And where that's taken me on the Speakly app is into the intermediate level of Speakly. So Speakly is sort of split up into 3 levels: beginners, intermediate, and advanced. The beginners level has 900 words. I would say that's around, when you finish the 900 words, after I'd done that, I felt I was definitely kind of an A1 level for sure. It felt quite good. Certainly I could talk about what I was doing, what I've done, what my plans were, what I like, what I don't like. I could talk about my family to a degree. I could talk about the weather. I could talk about things I would want to eat or do, or things I think, my opinions. I could talk about my studies of Estonian. I could do all of these things in Estonian, and I was doing them, and I did a number of obviously chats throughout the process, so that you could see after a week and 2 weeks, etc., of how I've done it. The other thing that I would say is that you sort of you feel that there are gaps, but I mean, this is something that happens anyway with language learning, right? Sometimes you learn things in class and then you forget. So I've been through a sort of a structured A1, A2 course and B1 course, and I've been through all of these in a sort of very structured way. And I can guarantee that I have learned things that were absolutely useless to me, and how I even remember them. Sometimes I remember some of them, sometimes I don't. Sometimes we've taken in so many words that I don't need, that it stops me from remembering the words I do need, because you're sort of overloading your brain and your ability to memorize certain things. So there are words that I definitely learned on those sorts of more traditional courses that really stopped that learning process to a degree. that has happened on a number of occasions. With Speakly, one of the big advantages is that they focus on words that you are likely to use. So words that sometimes in some languages are very, very easy for you to learn if you speak English and you're learning Spanish or French or whatever. Words like important, urgent, these kinds of words that are essential, to communicating, they're very, very easy to learn because they're similar to English. In other languages, they're not. They're actually very different. In Estonian, they are different. So getting those words in and knowing how to say, this is important to me, this is essential, these are things that we use to build up our ability to speak in the language, right? So learning how to say, I think that. Learning that construction in Estonian was really important. And they showed you it through lots of examples all the way through. So I would learn ma arvan et, I think that, ma loodan et, I hope that, ma, these kinds of, and then you go through the past tense and you go through the conditional. So we learned the past tense and the conditional. In Estonian, they don't seem to have a future tense. You would use, so mahakkan is I start doing something. And so you would learn these kinds of things through sample sentences. When you click on the sentences, you're sort of introduced in the app to new words. The new words themselves are translated and not clickable. And somebody commented about this on Facebook saying they found that was a weakness. I get where that comes from. What I found is if you use the app over a long period of time with a number of words, it's amazing how quickly these words get reused in different contexts where you can click on them and you can see how it is. And there's a little grammar button that if you want to go through it, you can. I actually found that I very rarely used the grammar button. I wanted to really just go through the language and see if I could make it out myself. And so it was a really interesting experience to go through the first few weeks and get to that sort of end of the beginners and then start the intermediate. And when I got to the intermediate stage, there are certain constructions still in Estonian that I'm being confronted with in the app that I don't really know why they work that way or how they work. I just kind of have to learn it and then figure out as I go where it's being used and how to manipulate it and how to generalize the rule. And I tried generalizing the rules during my speaking, my conversations with my teacher. I just sort of practice saying whatever I can as I think it might be right. And that is as many children will do when they're learning their first language or first languages. They will just play with the language until they kind of hit the sweet spot and get it right. I'll be corrected many times, and not worrying about being corrected is really, really key. With Speakly now, as I say, I've got to this sort of, I've done the first level of the intermediate. There are each level, beginners, intermediate, and advanced. They're split into 3 levels. So you have the intermediate, the beginners, which has 900 words. The intermediate has a few more. I think it has 1,100 words, and then the advanced course has 2,000 words. And that fits in with the video that I made about when you fill a funnel with language, you kind of reach the A1, A2 level with a relatively low number of words compared to, say, B1, B2, well, B2 particularly, because you've got so many more topics to explore to get to that level. And that means you need more words. So the fact that the advanced one has the same amount of words as the intermediate and beginners combined gives you a very good indication of that. And I think it's good that it's not just all equal measure, because that's definitely not how language learning works. It certainly is a more sort of, you notice a big jump because you're going from 0 when you get to the A1, A2 level. And then when you get through B1 to B2 and then beyond, the steps to actually reach those levels are significantly higher. Now, with doing the Estonian for a month, as I say, I was doing it for, say, 3 to 4 hours a day of Estonian study. But then in addition to that, my brain was thinking about Estonian a lot during the day, and in the evening and night, I would find Estonian words coming into my head, and I would find myself looking for Estonian words and thinking about Estonian words and sentences, just going about my daily business. So, you know, my thought processes and time as well, in addition to that, meant that possibly there was a cumulative effect of many more hours than just the 3-4 hours of concentrated study that I did a day. I'd certainly take breaks in between study sessions. So I would study a bit of Estonian, maybe do 10 words, and then I'd take a bit of a break, consider those words, and then I'd go back and I would do that again and again and again throughout the day. So it wouldn't be me sitting at a desk for 3 to 4 hours solidly. I didn't do that at all. I had breaks. Sometimes I did 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, depended on other things I had to do. So there were many, many different ways I went about this. It wasn't just this sort of sitting down and 4 hours done. Okay, now I move on to the next thing. Now, studying this kind of intensity, so the positives are obvious. Very, very quickly, I was having a conversation with an Estonian speaker, and it sounded great, right? To anybody who doesn't speak Estonian or speaks some Estonian, or even somebody who speaks Estonian potentially might look at that and say, I can't believe you're speaking Estonian after a week. But let's be honest, it was a week of very intensive study. It wasn't me doing like 2 hours of Estonian and then speaking Estonian. It was a week of very intensive learning, and me surrounding myself with Estonian for a week, listening to songs in Estonian and doing that kind of stuff. The song recommendations came from the Speakly app itself. So I got that from there. I also got listening activities and dialogues in the Speakly app that I could listen to too. And that was also good additional material. It was aimed at the level I was at, using words that were used already, but also some that were slightly beyond my level and where I was at. So what it does in Speakly is it gives you things to do, like it challenges you to put things together in a different way, and then it shows you another way potentially of doing it. So you would learn a way of saying something, then you would learn another way of saying it. You would see different uses of grammar in some of the things that you hadn't come across before. So there's no way you could have just said, you know, oh, that was easy, no sweat, which is sort of the option at the end of the thing. Was it, oh yeah, dead easy, no sweat, or was it really difficult? Was it hard? Very often I'd find myself saying, oh, it's too hard. But it's not that it was so hard that I couldn't understand. It was just I wouldn't have come up with those things naturally. So I was saying it was too hard. I found it challenging to come out with a lot of the things that they were asking me to come out with, because A, some of the vocabulary I didn't know, or B, some of the sentence structures might have been different because I wasn't very comfortable with the grammar, or I get the grammar wrong. And that's natural and normal at an A2 and even a B1 level. You don't cover up the grammar, the full grammar of a language, until you're kind of at the end of your B1 course. And then you've kind of covered most of the grammar. And then B2 is really focused more on polishing up the grammar, looking at some of the more really strange sort of details of the grammar and intricacies of how the language is different, some of the anomalies maybe. But up to that level, you're kind of just learning the grammar, the basics of the grammar. Now, where I kind of felt that, you know, I would go through these activities and I would do them. Where I found the disadvantage for me personally was languages that I have studied up until now, but not very much of, which are sort of the new languages I started in 2020. For me, they are in no particular order. So I started learning Cornish, Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, and also I started learning Korean in January. Now, my Korean just it felt like it affected my Korean quite a lot, because I was focusing so much on learning these different words in Estonian that it was not affecting the Korean that I knew. I could still understand a similar amount, but retrieving some vocabulary was more difficult. Also learning new Korean words and letting them stick was more difficult because my brain power was focused solely on Estonian. With Cornish, my Cornish I've been doing, I carried on with my Cornish conversation classes throughout this experience. And I can still understand Cornish to a similar level than I could before. I can still speak in Cornish to a similar level as I spoke before. So that's not been too badly impacted. There were a couple of times where I had a word, and the word is but. So when I started learning Estonian, I kept wanting to say mes for but, and mes is the Cornish word for but, and aga is the Estonian word. But the weird thing is I focused so hard on getting that right in Estonian and saying aga, 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 instead of mes, which I keep making that mistake. I focused so hard on it that when I went back to Cornish, I started saying aga in my Cornish instead of mes, which is absolutely mind-blowing. But it was almost like my brain wanted to overwrite this Cornish word and replace it with aga. It was very odd. But otherwise, Cornish was pretty well unaffected. The other thing that's interesting is that my Gaelic went completely out the window. I don't think I can even say even basic things in Gaelic at the moment. So that was never very strong, but it's certainly gone even further down. The other weird thing I experienced learning this is that some of my Latvian came back. Now, Latvian and Estonian are not related, but this is a big but. So Latvian and Lithuanian are related, but Lithuanian retained this porosity that apparently is the important thing about it, with sort of this link to Proto-Indo-European and the sort of the original Indo-European languages, which is why it's a fascinating language for many linguists. Latvian ended up with this very flat pronunciation, and that is an actual direct influence, as I recall, from the Livonian language, which is also in the same language group, to Estonian and Finnish. So they have a flatter intonation pattern. And so Latvian's intonation pattern is quite similar in that way. So sometimes Latvian feels, when you're speaking it, a little bit like Finnish and Estonian in a strange way. And I found that some of these words in Latvian were coming back. So I'd go to say võib olla, which is maybe in Estonian, and I would say varbūt, which is maybe in Latvian. So a couple of times I had those kinds of things that came into my brain, which were very, very strange. And I think there was some shared vocabulary as well. That I think Majas was house or home in both. So it got a bit strange when I was sort of dealing with those kinds of interferences and stuff. But otherwise, it's been a very positive experience doing it. It does kind of leave me with a bit of a quandary. Questions on Estonian grammar. I didn't study the grammar. I actually deliberately didn't study the grammar. Again, I'd studied it years ago in terms of just to get an idea of how it worked. And yes, it's got a large number of cases. Now, so there can be debates on what we mean by cases, but yes, there are a large number of cases in these languages. People asked me, can I remember 1,240 words now? Could I list them all off? Probably not, no. Do I know around that number? Probably yes. Because with Speakly, you get the repetition over and over again. If I didn't know a lot of those words, I wouldn't be able to have the conversations I've been having in Estonian. So the month did deliver on me getting to a point where I can talk about a number of things. One of the last conversations I had with my italki teacher was about my daughter's interest in studying architecture at university, and how I used to live in the Netherlands, and particularly in Rotterdam, where they have very interesting architecture, and they've got the cube houses on the harbour. And I could say all of that in Estonian with mistakes, but I could say it. So that's the kind of things that I can say. To be able to do that in a language and not have that many words would be very difficult. There would be things, basic things though, that I wouldn't be able to say to you in Estonian. I couldn't give you instructions on how to make a cup of coffee So I couldn't tell you, for example, put water in the kettle, put the kettle on, boil the water, pour the water into a cup, put in the coffee, put in sugar, put in milk. I could tell you parts of it. I could tell you make a coffee, use water, use milk, use sugar, but I couldn't use verbs like pour the water from the kettle into the cup. I could get close. I could give you vague instructions, but I couldn't give you exact instructions. So there are things like that that are still a little bit not there, but that would be normal for this kind of level anyway, regardless of whether or not you learnt it through Speakly or whatever. Some people may remember and retain those words, others won't. So I didn't expect that too much. The other question I got was, I'm trying to think if there anything else I missed. Did I use any other materials? No, I used, I just used the Speakly app and then the recommended songs that they gave me. And that was really it, and they're listening. So that was really it for Estonian. The conundrum I have now, the sort of thing I'm dealing with now is this: what do you do after you've done a month of intensive language study? Because not doing anything with Estonian now would be a disaster. I think I would feel like I've just spent a long time showing you what an application does, but then actually the information that I've learned, yeah, I could, I suppose, get rid of it, but feels a bit of a shame. And part of me also thought that it would be good to see what happens at the end of Speakly. Like, how well can I speak a language at the end of Speakly? And so what I'm doing now is I've decided I'm going to carry on with Estonian. So for the whole of August, I'm going to study Estonian intensively and get to the end of the intermediate level. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to reduce the number of words from 40 to 30 a day, just because up to this level, 30 a day, 40 a day has not been too bad. It's been a lot some days. I'll be honest with you, it's been a lot some days. And some words I think are harder to remember because of doing that many. But what I'll do now is I'll reduce it to 30, which is still an awful lot of words. And under normal circumstances, I wouldn't usually advise people to learn 30 or 40 words a day on the long term, because unless you've got the time to do it and the space to do it, and you've got a real reason to do it. Because really, I think, Oit actually made a video recently where he was talking about how many words, and, doing sort of 10 words, possibly 5 to 15 is probably a good number of words to do, and to take it over a long period of time so you get a lot of repetition. The important thing is to do it every day. That's the important thing. And Oit says that as well. And it's completely true. Every day is the important thing. So you do a little bit every day. Otherwise, your brain gets out of the habit and starts rejecting things it doesn't need. That's what happens, right? It deletes these files that it doesn't need anymore, like a computer. I don't know. It's like, this is what happens. So my plan is for August, because August is kind of a month where I can still do this. It's before my courses start again. It's before the real crazy with starting to prepare things for Polyglot Conference happen in sort of September, the end of August, early September, and then beyond all the way through to October. So my plan is this: I will do 30 words a day in August. When it gets to September, I will drop that down to 15 words a day. I will halve it. And then I will do 15 words a day, and that should take me to the last day of this year. And that means I will have done 4,000 Estonian words on Speakly and completed all 3 levels. And we'll see how I feel at the end of all 3 levels. Will I be at this kind of B2-ish level? I don't know, but it will be interesting to see. And I think that doing 15 words a day will be more manageable with my other languages that I do want to continue with. But it will be good to finish it. And I think that, as I say, reviews of products and reviews of apps particularly, it's good to actually go through the whole process and see what it does. So this is what I'll do. I'll carry on with Estonian until the end of the year. And next year, if I can, my ultimate goal will be to see if I can sit an Estonian exam and pass it. I like exams, right? I love language exams. I did my Cornish grade 1 exam and loved it. I love sitting exams. I know there's probably something wrong with me. I really enjoy doing them. So I will look at doing an Estonian exam. I will need to probably focus a little bit on the grammar a bit more so that I can make sure the writing skills sort of I can do exercises on the exam, for example, where you have to substitute out words and put in certain things in certain grammatical forms. I will need to probably focus a little bit on that, because at the moment what I do is I use and slot in sentences that I've learned and I know how they work and I understand most of what is said back as well. So I will just continue doing that, and that will be the next step in my Estonian, because I know many of you asked me that question, what will I do? And that's it. I'm going to start looking at your questions now. I hope that was useful to sort of hear my full appraisal. I'm happy to answer any other questions if I missed anything, or if there are any specific questions about Speakly, about Estonian, about me learning these languages and how I'm doing it and what's going on. I'm very happy to sort of share as much as I can. I have been hopefully making useful short videos at the end of every single day of this month. If you found those useful, let me know, because I'd like to know if you want me to carry those on. I'm happy to kind of carry on things like that. I've enjoyed doing them. It's quite a thing to try and say something useful in 30 seconds. It's becoming a skill that I'm working on myself. Okay. I see you saying you've been doing Russian for 4 months, but you can't get to the level where I am with Estonian in just 1 month. I've been studying Estonian, so my Estonian has been really intensive, really, really intensive. Also, Estonian's written with the Latin script, so it's very easy for me to visualize that Latin script. When you're dealing with a different script, and I find this with Korean, I can see a word 100 times because it's very difficult for me to visualize the Hangul in my head. I can read it if I see it, but I can't necessarily visualize it. I'm not there yet with my Hangul. So I find sometimes retaining the words quite challenging. That can play a part. Also, how intensively you've been doing it. You could have been doing it for 4 months, but have you done the equivalent of what I did in a month, which is 3-4 hours a day is a lot. It's a lot of hours. I mean, and then the thought processes and the preparation behind it and practice with a teacher as well. You're talking at nearly a full-time job. It's a big thing to do for a month, in the way I've done it. I've not, it's not like I did an hour a week or 2 hours a week or like 15 minutes a day. I've done a lot of Estonian in the last month. So, comparison with what I've done with Estonian, possibly not fair on you. And so I probably ask you to maybe think about the hours you've done with Russian, and also if it's a new script, is that playing a part? Also, Russian, to read and write Russian. Russian isn't a phonetic language, because Estonian, you write what you say. It's super simple in terms of how you read and write it. It's like Spanish or Italian or German. You basically pronounce everything you see. There are languages that are much more difficult. English is more difficult because you don't read and write as you speak. Russian, you don't read and write as you speak, because you write moloko, but you write moloko, but you say moloko. So those O's become A's in Russian. And there are many, 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 many other things with Russian writing as well. How you, where the intonation falls. In Estonian, that's much more simple to get right. So that helps a lot with memorizing words and phrases. I'm so glad that some of you, you're writing to say you've been following this journey, and I'm really, really pleased. Thank you. Thanks for supporting it and for being here. I really, really appreciate it. It's really, really nice to see that, and I hope that my thoughts, and I'm sort of doing a reasonable job, at least in getting this, getting across what this has been like and how I've been doing it, and I hope that it's all been useful. Okay, let me see. What ethnicity does the name Simcot? The ethnicity of my name, my surname, I have no idea. I imagine Germanic in some way. I don't know though. Paliwana, yeah, there you are. I need to go watch it later. Okay, great. Nice to see you, Nimrod. Yeah, Nimrod, you were mentioned, so I hope you get to see this later. In terms of your question, that was the one from Facebook. Fun in Japanese. Okay, that's cool. Classmates, cool. Koku, yeah, koku. Yeah, there are funny words that sometimes they mean something slightly different in another language, or sometimes they can be rude in a different language. There are certainly words that I've come across that have been funny because they mean something a little bit different in other languages I speak. Craig, you've been learning Greek. Oh, fantastic! I absolutely love Greek. It's one of my faves because it's influenced so many languages, not just European, actually, all around the world. Because many of the borrowings from English or whatever have actually, you get a lot of things that have come from Latin or Greek. So Greek is a great language to learn. So many cool linguistic stories that you can tell just from the etymology of the words because of the Greek origins. Yeah, okay. So Timothy, me talking about my description of the funnel, and Steve had an ice hockey stick. I've not seen that, but I have to check it out. Steve's always funny. He'd have to do an ice hockey stick being Canadian. What other languages does Speakly app do? Okay, instead of just, that's a good question, Chanel. So they have English, French, Spanish, Italian, German, Russian, Finnish, and Estonian. Those 8, and they're going to have more. I don't know if I don't know. I mentioned this kind of off camera, but I think that they're doing. I think it's been mentioned. I think they're working on Portuguese and Norwegian and Swedish, and they may be doing some of the Asian languages as well. But I can't quite remember now off the top of my head. I don't know if that's secret. I'm sorry if it is, Speakly, but anyway, there we go. Let me see. Ma pean praegu kahjuks ära minema, aga kuulan pärast järele. Oh, okei. Pole probleemi, Ivo. Eitä. Sanemme ja mä kirjoitan email. Okay. Let me see. So Jane Hall, Latvian and Lithuanian have taken some of the locative cases from Finnic languages. Yeah, I can imagine that would be true. It feels like that when you talk about where you are in, like, for example, yeah. So in Latvian, you would say Anglias or Latvias in Latvia, and that is how you would say it in Estonian too. You just add an S at the end. You don't elongate the A sound though in Estonian, but you'd use that, for example, in the Estonian language and things like that. Have any of your stronger languages been impacted by such an intensive challenge? Actually not, no. The very strong languages that I speak, my home languages, zero impact, zero. I found that quite interesting because I don't know if I half expected that to be the case, but no, it really hasn't. They've very much stayed the way they were, no problem at all. It was the newer languages that have been impacted most. Even languages, for example, where I would say I'm not really advanced in the language. For example, like, I mean, some of the other Balkan languages that I speak, like Albanian, Greek, Turkish, where, I'm kind of like a B1-ish level in those languages. In those languages, I've not had any problem whatsoever. They've stayed, I use them. I think it's a lot to do with how long you've been speaking those languages. So those 3 languages, for example, I've been able to communicate in for many, many years. And even though my level hasn't really gone up very far, I've only ever needed them at the level that they're at. But because I've used them so much, they are very automatic at the level they're at. So I don't tend to lose them very easily. Romanian, for example, I learned it quickly, and I didn't use it very much, so it went down a lot. And similar with, as I say, with Finnish, I kind of learned it to an A2 level, but I did it in a very quick period of time. I did it within like 3 months, and then it went as soon as I left and didn't use it. It's amazing actually how your brain does this with languages. I still don't fully understand why or how. The only thing that I can determine is that it seems to depend on how long you've had the language and used it to that level in your brain on a daily basis, and how often that happens. I think that helps. The other thing that helps is if the language is close to another language you speak very well, but significantly different, different enough for that language to help with the similarities, but also not to merge on. So I'll give you an example. My Russian has never been amazing, but I'm always able to just speak Russian in a conversation without much of any problem. Czech I can get back into too, Polish as well. Slovak I can't. Slovak is just like gone into Czech completely. It just got completely subsumed into Czech. Slovene I could chat away in Slovene. It's gone into Serbian and Croatian completely. I mean, I can say things in Slovene and I can understand it still, but it's just gone into it. So a lot depends on how similar it is, and a lot depends on how strong the other languages are. I think that's part of it. Well, a lot of it. But I would love to know if anyone's studying this kind of phenomenon. I'd love to know more about it. I imagine there's a lot more sort of in terms of neuroscience and how that works. There's probably a lot to be understood. Okay. Do you find it interesting that Estonian essentially has an imperfect tense conveyed through the partitive case, as maybe seen through declension used communicate tense in any other language? I haven't come across that properly yet, Jamie. Or at least it hasn't been obvious to me yet. I probably haven't seen enough examples, or my level's not quite there yet with it. But I suppose it's normal as well when you're sort of dealing with this kind of A2 level. It's you get things, but you may not fully get things, if you know what I mean. But I'm not that I'm aware of it. You're going to take an oral proficiency interview for Russian. Fantastic, Chanel. All the very best of luck for that. Congratulations. I hope it all goes very well for you. When you learn 40 words a day, do you do one big session? No. I do, 10 at a time. It's kind of how it's been done, Mike. So, yeah, not all at once, because that would have been... Sometimes I do 20 if I found that the words were similar. So sometimes I do a session and the words would be words I'd already seen and remembered, even though they weren't words I was supposed to learn. So what happens in the Speakly app is that it will teach you a word, but that word will have been introduced in other contexts before. So you could have learnt it in a sentence, giving an example of another word that you're supposed to learn. It could have been in one of the stories or one of the dialogues. So it was weird. You'd sort of see a word, and then when it was a new word, it wasn't really a new word. So I found that sometimes I would have that experience that was the word I was meant to learn, but I already knew it. So yeah, or the word was similar to words it was kind of a combo word of words I already knew. So you kind of get used to how they fit together, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, seeing some comments there on the Russian. Absolutely, the vowel, the changes are a real nightmare with it, with the pronunciation. Absolutely get that. Let me see. Yeah, Polish can be a lot easier than Russian for it's written as it's written as you say it, and so Polish is, and it's more standard in terms of pronunciation, whereas Russian, that's the nightmare with Russian, right? If you were learning Greek where Speakly isn't an option, what resources would you start with if you wanted to do a similar challenge? Oh, great question. So I'm quite a big fan of the Click series. I quite like the Click series for Greek. They can be a bit scary in that they're all in Greek, but I really like them. And I like the kind of things that are in them. I enjoy reading the articles in them. They're actually genuinely interesting, some of them. So that's what I'm using at the moment with Greek as well, Click. And I've been using it for a few years. When I first started learning Greek, I used Levend Grieks, which was a Dutch course, because I started learning Greek in the Netherlands when I was. In fact, I went to the course to improve my Dutch, not to learn Greek as a primary reason. I wanted to meet Dutch people who were interested in languages. And I started learning it through that. And then actually the Greek that I started using was more me going to Greece and practicing. So it's a bit difficult to go back in time and think of it. I would say you don't have much of a choice really, because there isn't kind of this Speakly idea is, let me give you an example from Speakly. You don't learn all of the days of the week together, okay, as the days of the week. So they will teach you the most used, strangely enough, some days of the week are more used in sentences than others, according to the algorithm, right? So if you look at days of the week, you will hear certain days of the week more than others. So they teach you the days of the week in that kind of way. So it took me maybe a few levels of Estonian in Speakly to learn days of the week. Whereas if you learn the days of the week in most traditional courses, they'll have them all listed, along with all of the seasons, all of the months of the year, and pretty much everything else to do with that kind of thing. They'll all be in topics. And that can be one of the problems with thinking you have to memorize everything, right? It can overload the brain instead of focusing on things to say that you can say, speak and use the language. So that can be an issue. But I have found that Click's been pretty good. So I would recommend that. To start speaking, in the very beginning, just to get a bit of confidence, sometimes some of the Michael Thomas stuff can be quite handy to sort of say things like, I always say this about Japanese. I've not used the Greek one, but because I don't use it for languages I already know, obviously, and I already knew how to speak Greek before that even came on the market. But for Japanese, for example, some of the more basic things in Japanese I remember because of the Michael Thomas method. Just the stories stick in your mind, and it helps you remember them. So that really, really helped. So I can maybe some of that kind of stuff together with the Click. If you're not scared of the Click method, it is all in Greek. Doing it every day is the most important thing. What resources studying Greek? Oh, okay. From A1 to B2 level. Yeah, Olga, the same question as Craig. That would be it. So Click has A1, A2, B1, B2, and okay, it's not C, it's Rama. C1 has a C1 course. The C1 course is like twice as thick as the other ones. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would use. Have you ever thought of giving a shot to italki to enhance speaking your Estonian? Yeah, I've been using an italki teacher. So my first conversation in Estonian after a week was with an italki teacher. So you can check that out on my channel. I have used that. Okay. Okay. TV-Serien auf Deutsch. Okay. Um dein Deutsch zu verbessern, den Wortschatz zu erweitern. Also das ist ein bisschen schwierig, weil ich ja im Moment nicht in Deutschland bin und ich gucke jetzt eigentlich keine TV-Serien auf Deutsch, aber ich habe immer, also in Deutschland habe ich immer so, wie waren die jetzt? Sie waren unter uns habe ich immer so so, also im Hintergrund gehabt, soll ich sagen. Und dann auch, es gab noch was, und es gab noch was mit Türken. Was war das nochmal? Ich vergesse es immer. Also, aber also, wie war das? Türkisch für Anfänger war das vielleicht. Ja, vielleicht. Türkisch für Anfänger. Das ist eigentlich mehr so lustig. Also, wenn du sowas so anschauen willst, ist es ja ganz komisch. Und ja, ob du das in Deutschland dann sehen kannst, weiß ich gar nicht. Wo du bist eigentlich, das weiß ich gar nicht. Ich meine, das ist ja in Deutschland natürlich. Also ob man so VPN so braucht oder so VPN. Ja, weiß ich nicht. Ja, hoffentlich hilft es dir ein bisschen. Und dann noch auch Nachrichten natürlich. Also Deutsche Welle hat ja Nachrichten und solche Sachen sind auch sehr gut, um deinen Wortschatz ein bisschen zu erweitern und zu verbessern. Ja. When do you think Speakery will come out with a Macedonian course? I have no idea. That would be cool, wouldn't it? Definitely, Macedonian is the easiest Slavic language to learn easily. And it's a very good language to learn if you want to understand, because you can understand Bulgarian and you can understand Serbian and Croatian pretty easily from Macedonian. It doesn't take much effort, and but the grammar is such that it's very standardized. So whereas Bulgarian, the accent shifts on the words and it's not easy to predict. Whereas in Macedonian, it's standard and it's so much easier to learn for that reason. The not having cases makes both Bulgarian and Macedonian way easier than for most people than other languages. But for other Slavic speakers, they tend to have trouble with the definite article, because there's a definite article that we use in Macedonian and Bulgarian, and it goes to the end of the word, like in the Scandinavian languages, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian. Click is spelled K-I-L-K, Craig. Click. Click sta alimika. Click. Sta alimika. Το γράψω έτσι, αλλά στα αγγλικά. Ελληνικά. Okay, click στα ελληνικά είναι. Νομίζω ότι είναι έτσι. Elpizo. I hope that's the way I write it in. Leven Grieks. Yeah, Leven Grieks. It's a little blue book. So click Stalinika. Είναι στο Amazon, νομίζω. It's on Amazon, I think. This is what happens to my brain. I start saying something in a language and my brain switches over. Türkisch für Anfänger. Denke ich mal, ja. Also Türkisch für Anfänger. So war's. Aber es ist eigentlich ja also zwei Familien, die sind in Deutschland. Also der Mann kommt ursprünglich aus der Türkei und die Frau aus Deutschland, die ist so ein bisschen ein Hippie-Typ von es ist eigentlich sehr merkwürdig, wie sie alle zusammenkommen. Die Kinder sind ja also Junge und Mädchen aus Deutschland und dann die Kinder, die sind auch Deutsche, aber mit dem Vater aus der Türkei. Die kommen zusammen, die leben zusammen und ja, so wie es alles unterschiedlich ist, wie sie leben, das ist ganz, ganz interessant und manchmal auch witzig. Auch Netflix, ja, denke ich mal. Ich denke, es gibt ja schon auf Netflix, denke ich mal, ja. Teşekkür rica ederim. Okay, let me see if I can see any more questions. Sorry, it's wow, it says, oh, I have a question. Can you please see best language learning apps for vocabulary and grammar? Yeah, I don't. This is the thing, right? So I've used apps before to a degree, and this is why I wanted to not just talk about Speakly as oh yeah, this app does this, and this. I wanted to actually show you and talk to you about what I can do after using it for a month. in terms of grammar, I mean, the grammar is on Speakly. You can look through the grammar, right? You can see it. You can click on it. And you can also book a lesson with a Speakly teacher on the app. And I did that once as well. And the cool thing about that is that they know the level you're at. And you sort of go through and you work through the types of vocabulary and types of phrases that you should know at that level. And they give you explanations. So I spoke to Inga and she was really good. And I've recorded that session and put it on my YouTube channel too. And the really cool thing is it kind of shows you to how you can build things together and put the language together. And that's what I do. I just play with the language until it works. But she went through and explained some things I hadn't got. For example, she explained to me in Estonian how it worked with the comparative and superlative in Estonian. And I hadn't got that properly. I couldn't figure out what the difference was. For example, I don't know, think of a word. Maitsev is delicious in Estonian. So maitsevem is more delicious and koiga maitsevem is the most delicious. So I didn't put all of that together. And she helped me to sort of make that link, which I wasn't at the stage where I'd done the comparatives properly. I was still on the, when I had the conversation with her, I was still on the beginner's level in Estonian. So it hadn't properly come up. And a couple of lessons later, a couple of days later, it started to come out as well. Četl si českou literaturu, když ano, které autory? Já jsem četla Brancou Betlovou. Ne, asi ne. To jsme četli asi trochu v univerzitě, ale to bylo asi dávno, teďka to bylo asi, já nevím, to před 10-15 letí, takže to nevím. Ale jak to bylo pro tebe? Jak to bylo tam se načetně v češtině? Okay. Let me see. Turkish school, yes. Okay, I don't know if I can see any more questions right now. I see lots of conversations between you, and I like seeing that. It's nice. So I really hope that this was a useful session to sort of round off this month of intensive Estonian. And as I say, I'm going to carry on for August. It's kind of intensive as well, really, if I'm honest. But the idea will be that I will get to the end of... I'm reading Erasmus, so I've been reading the Instagram comments as well. I'm going through... many of them seem to be people saying hello and talking to each other. I think I've been through most of them. But if I haven't, please feel free to let me know. I've tried my best to get through all of them. The Instagram comments sort of go through quite quickly, but I believe I got to the end of them. If I haven't, please do feel free to write something here, and I will definitely answer as best I can. Okay. Am I staying with Speakly or ready to move on? So I'm going to stay with Speakly for now, and I want to go through the whole app and see where I get with it. And I will continue having my lessons, but as I start to go back to my other languages as well more, I will, when I go down to the 15 words a day from September, I want to start going back and revising some of my other languages when I start the next levels of those courses. So I will be doing grade 2 Cornish from September, and I'm going to be doing, it's called intermediate Gaelic, but I'm not sure it's really intermediate. I can read certain things in Gaelic and they make sense, but it doesn't feel very intermediate to me. But maybe that will come around. I mean, the idea is the next level, we're going to start speaking a bit more. And then with Korean, it's kind of a slow burn. Rasmus, my question is still about the number of words. You said beyond 40 is not recommended unless person has a reason. Do you think that there is a number where efficiency drops? Rasmus, absolutely. Learning 40 words a day for this month as a beginning sort of level for the language wasn't too bad, because many of the words I've seen have got, this is the cool thing with Estonian, right? If you look at a language like Estonian and you see that there are a lot of borrowings, so organization, words like organization, problem, they're all Indo-European words in Estonian. The word for project is project. So these kinds of words are all the same. So when you're talking about 40 words a day and you've got lots of words that are similar, that helps. Where I think it can be difficult is that you need to keep repeating these words. So taking on so many words, remember you're taking on new words every day and you still need to repeat all of them. So what I found is that the amount of time I was spending on Speakly actually increased because I needed to go through so many revisions of words. So it may have been even more like, on some days, 5 or 6 hours that I would need to get through and revise words I'd already done. So, I mean, I'm talking kind of a medium. Sometimes it would be 3, sometimes it would be 5 or 6, but sort of that's why I say around 3 to 4 hours, maybe a little bit more sometimes. But it took a lot of time. And I think if you're learning languages that are similar, it can be easier if you're using the words a lot and every day. But it can also be a complete nightmare and very confusing if you're not using them very often and you're not revising them every day. In fact, it could probably be very confusing. I found in Indonesian and in Maori, the words were very similar, and I found it very difficult to learn many, many words quickly. Finding the same problem with Korean. Estonian, I don't have that problem with so much because Estonian is... yeah, maybe you know, because it's spoken in Europe and it's borrowed a lot from these languages and some things do sound familiar, that's probably why it's helped. Would you say that the experiment with German was a successful one? 130 words seems absolutely scary and inefficient. Erasmus, at the time, yes. So German was this is why I say I would never recommend anyone to do this unless you really had a very specific reason. The German reason for learning 130 plus words a day was that I was living in Germany. I was using the language all day, every day, with people outside, TV. We didn't have the internet at that time in the same way as we do now. Everything was in German, everything. So I was getting a lot of repetition during the time I was in Germany of all of the words I learned. So I only really did that 130 words for a month. And then afterwards, I was getting them repeated over and over again. Some words I will have forgotten, of course. It's natural. But I had enough of them to understand and to keep picking them up again, which was how it worked. And then I had to sit an exam in German to go to university in Spain. And that's why I did it. It was a very specific reason. And then afterwards, I kept going backwards and forwards to Germany. And then I got a job working in German. And so my German just stayed because it wasn't just me doing a month of German and then leaving it. It was me doing a month of very intensive German, then staying in Germany an extra 2 months, using it every day, and then studying in German at a university in Spain, and then going backwards and forwards to Germany, and then eventually working through German for several years. So it's a very different story. I don't know if I'm at a very different stage in my life now with learning languages. I don't know what will happen with Estonian. Setting myself a goal of maybe sitting an exam next year might be a good way of maintaining it and keeping it up. Oh, Lucas, I'm glad that you enjoyed the shorts. That's really nice to know. Let me see. Is it you, sir, that you learn with Greta late at night? Yes, it is me. I wanted to book the same hours and you couldn't get them because I was booking them. Yeah, I had my lessons with Greta about 9 to 10 in the evening, at the end of the day. Sometimes it was like my brain was fried at the end of it, but it was very, very good. I did it at that time because I tend to have my study groups on Clubhouse for Korean at 8 p.m. My time, 8 to 9. And so I don't want to miss my Korean study groups. I love my Korean study group. It's a great group. What has your vocabulary source been for German at the time in the past? I took the school syllabus for the United Kingdom for German with me to Germany, and I studied that. Okay, you have a reason, but you're not going to be able to replicate the environment and everything you have done with German. You need to take it a bit easier with Russian. Yeah, it's not always a thing that you can do. Life is different for everyone, right? And life is different at different stages. Even for me, I was lucky in that. I say sounds lucky, sounds strange. I was in a part where I didn't have many other projects on for the whole of July. It's very, very hot outside in the Balkans at the moment. I don't really want to go out very much. I pretty much focused on just doing Estonian. So I had a couple of days where I had things I had to do, made it a bit difficult to get the hours in and the study done, but pretty much I did it the whole time, and that's what happened. Yeah, I mean, it's been 40. I want to say like 43 degrees here. It's been crazy. I mean, who goes out in 43-degree heat? It's just insane. So with the pandemic, it's meant that I've been at home a lot more, and so I could do it, and I could put things on. You'd love me to do a video on how languages help me in my career. Yeah, I'm happy to do something about that. Absolutely. Would you recommend Speakly in general for a complete language course for A1, A2 levels, or even further? I would recommend Speakly. I can't say anything except I was told by Oit that I would get to this sort of ability with if I did it full time every day, and I did. So it worked. I mean, it did work, and I found that the word choices were actually pretty useful and good and relevant. There were things I wanted to say and often had to say. So I could express opinions. I could talk about things. I mean, I got a comment from Yvonne here in Estonian, and I understood it. So, and that, I mean, I don't know Ivo. I don't. He's written to me on Facebook to say, we want to have a chat, and I'd be very happy to do that with anyone who speaks Estonian. I'd love to chat and practice my Estonian. But other than that, I mean, he just wrote a message in Estonian, and I understood it. So if I've done that after a month of doing Estonian with Speakly, I think it's working fairly well. Well, the other cool thing actually is that some of the song recommendations now, I start to understand the words and the lyrics, which is crazy. I don't know why Russian is so necessary for so many jobs in Estonia. I thought Estonian was enough, but apparently not. Every single job like call center require. Yeah, Rasmus, it's because many Russian speakers don't speak Estonian very well in Estonia. This is it's quite a controversial issue. There are parts of Estonian where Russian is the main language as well, like the part near, I think it's Narva or Nerva I forget the name of the city, but it's on the Russian border, and they mainly speak Russian there. In Tallinn too, there are Russian schools as well. People who learn in Russian, they have Estonian lessons, but they don't necessarily speak Estonian that well, and so they look for what they need in Russian. Same thing goes for, I think, younger Estonians don't tend to speak Russian as well as previous generations, but there's a lot of stuff mixed into that. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you've seen adverts looking for Russian too. When I was in Tallinn, I did use Russian as well. So I didn't speak Estonian at all. And I knew how to say in Estonian, hello, do you speak English? And if they didn't speak English, I'd ask if they spoke Russian. That was about as much as I know. And then I would use Russian, but that was it. Would you recommend any books focused on Estonian cases? These two books that I mentioned here, that that I've got, Einagoesti and Estonian textbook, they both have exercises on the cases. But you can, I mean, as I say, you can look at the cases in Speakly. Personally, for me, on a phone, I don't like reading about grammar on my phone or on my iPad particularly. I would prefer to read it in a book. I mean, my iPad's maybe a bit better because I can make it bigger and I can go in but I do quite like books for grammar. But yeah, I mean, if you're into grammar, let's see. I'll finish off now. I realize that I've gone for an hour and 15 minutes. And as interesting as some of you may feel I am, I'm sure there's a larger number who feel that I'm probably driving them crazy making these very long videos. Okay, do you recommend after Speakly that it's time to jump into more diverse vocabulary? I don't know what you mean by that, Rasmus. More diverse vocabulary. If you're specializing in something, for example, with Speakly, there is a word that I didn't know from Speakly, and I had to learn it because it's relevant to my life. So the word for the Macedonian language wasn't in Speakly, and of course that's a really important part of my life because it's my home language. So I needed to learn that, so I had to ask for that word. So words like that, yes, but I think it's probably good to focus on the words in Speakly because they're the most common words that you will use and hear. It can be a bit of a you can end up sort of going on a wild goose chase, chasing lots of words that you potentially will not remember and may never use. So I think for the beginning stages, for sure, maybe even the intermediate, it's good to sort of follow a program and then learn the words that you definitely need because they're applicable to your life, if that makes sense. Okay, so a 12-hour marathon with me. I think, oh my word, not even my wife wants that. I mean, to be talking for 12 hours. In Speakly, focus most on frequently used. Yeah, so it's mostly frequent words, but it's not like a frequent word dictionary type thing. They've taken vocabulary and dialogues and language used in real life situations, and they've analyzed all of that and then put that in the app. That's what they've done. So it's pretty cool. I mean, as I've been going through it, I've been writing out all of the things I've been learning, just because I like to practice writing them and typing them. It's been part of my sort of routine. I mentioned that in one of my in one of my 30-second things that I made, the videos. So that's a lot of fun. Yeah, lots of questions. I'm really pleased to see lots of questions. It means that at least I've it's at least I've sort of I'm answering questions that are interesting for you. How easy it for Estonian speakers to understand Finnish and for a Bulgarian speaker to understand Macedonian? Estonian speaker Finnish, not so easy if they don't know it, if they've never been exposed to it. They're fairly different. And then spoken Finnish and written Finnish are very different. So there are two. In Finland, you learn a standard written form, but they don't speak like that. I know that there are people, like when Estonia, years and years ago, when it was in the Soviet bloc, the people in the north of Estonia had Finnish TV and radio, and so a lot of them learnt Finnish. And in the south, they had German, so they learnt German. Oit is one of those people that learnt German, for example, but I've met many Estonians that learnt Finnish very well. Nowadays, yeah, I think the younger generation probably don't speak Finnish as well. They tend to be more focused on English. For Bulgarian speakers and Macedonian speakers, they're mutually intelligible languages. It's totally possible to have a conversation, as it is with like Swedish and Norwegian. And just like Swedish and Norwegian, if you make a joke or you use something quite colloquial, that's when they won't understand. So there can be certain words also mean different things. So for example, the word for In Bulgarian, the word kalinka means it means a ladybird or a ladybug if you're from the United States. And in Macedonian, it means pomegranate. So quite different words. But the Bulgarians use a Turkish word nar for pomegranate, and that's becoming a more old-fashioned word in Macedonian for pomegranate. Kalinka is a normal word. And then you get words that, yeah, they make you laugh because they mean something quite different. So when you get to the border with Bulgaria, you have mitnica. Mitnica is the Bulgarian word for customs, but mito in Macedonian means a bribe. So a mitnica would be a place where you take a bribe. Hilarious. Yeah, exactly. So there are some things that are quite funny that are different, but generally, yeah. I mean, if I have a conversation, I normally speak Bulgarian to Bulgarians. I switch, but I could speak Macedonian, and they would follow what's going on, and I would follow the Bulgarian. And similar thing happens with most speakers of both languages; they are mutually intelligible. Similar thing happens in Serbian as well. If you speak Macedonian and they speak Serbian, you can. It's especially the south of Serbia. There's a dialectal continuum around, and you can communicate quite effectively. You would need to know certain words that are different. You know, words like konobar in Serbian is the word for kellner. Oh my word, a waiter. Macedonian is kellner, and that's a word from German, which also appears in Estonian. This is the nuts thing, is that you see these words that appear in the Balkans from German, and they also appear in the Baltics in Estonian, which I've really enjoyed seeing. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to go because I think that I have probably talked the ear off you all now, and you've probably had enough of me. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week, and we will talk more about languages. Pop your comments and thoughts and questions in the sort of the comment areas, and let me know what you want to hear about. Happy to sort of talk about things that interest you. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye, and happy language learning.